The moment Karen dumped Denise's papers across the marble floor, she crossed a line she could never uncross. A soaked black woman in a wheelchair rolled into a prestigious rehabilitation center for what should have been the most important meeting of her life. Instead, a receptionist took one look at her worn coat, refused to type her name, and treated her like she didn't belong. Humiliated in front of a crowded lobby, Denise Carter quietly endured what so many people face every day. But no one in that building knew a secret that was about to change everything. Because 1 week earlier, Denise had stopped in the middle of a storm to help a dying stranger everyone else ignored. And that stranger turned out to be a billionaire who had spent days searching the city for the woman who saved his life. What happened next left an entire building completely speechless. Denise Carter rolled through the glass doors of Whitman Hope Center, with rainwater dripping from the sleeves of her old brown coat. Outside, Atlanta was waking under a gray morning sky. Cars hissed over wet pavement. A city bus groaned at the curb. Somewhere down Peachtree Street, a horn blared, then faded into the steady sound of tires slicing through rain. Denise paused just inside the entrance, letting the warm air of the lobby settle over her face. For a moment, she simply looked around. Whitman Hope Center did not look like the clinics she knew. It did not smell like bleach, old coffee, and crowded waiting rooms. It smelled like fresh lilies, polished wood, and expensive soap. The lobby stretched wide and bright beneath soft golden lights. A white marble floor reflected the ceiling like still water. Near the far wall, a small indoor fountain whispered beside a row of leather chairs where well-dressed patients waited with phones in their hands and designer bags at their feet. Denise looked down at her own lap. Her coat was clean but worn thin at the cuffs. Her black gloves had a split near the thumb. The left wheel of her chair still carried mud from the cracked sidewalk outside her apartment building. She noticed the faint trail it left behind on the marble and felt her shoulders tighten. She hated that feeling. Not shame exactly. Something older. Something heavier. The feeling of entering a room and knowing, before anyone spoke, that she had already been placed somewhere in their mind. Poor. Lost. Trouble. She took a slow breath, adjusted the leather folder resting against her knees, and rolled toward the reception desk. Behind it sat a woman with honey blonde hair swept into a perfect twist. Her name badge read Karen Miller. She wore a cream blouse, pearl earrings, and the kind of smile that looked practiced but not generous. She was speaking softly to an older white couple when Denise approached, her tone warm as butter. "Of course, Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell. Dr. Reeves is expecting you. Take the private elevator to the 3rd floor. Someone will meet you right there." The couple thanked her. Karen smiled until they turned away. Then her eyes dropped to Denise. The smile disappeared so quickly it felt like someone had switched off a lamp. Denise stopped at the desk. The counter was too high, rising nearly to her chin. She had to tilt her head back slightly to meet Karen's eyes. "Good morning," Denise said. Her voice was calm, low, and clear. "My name is Denise Carter. I have a 9:30 meeting with management." Karen blinked once, not in surprise, in irritation. "A meeting?" she repeated. "Yes, ma'am. At 9:30. Karen leaned back in her chair and looked Denise over again, from the damp scarf around her neck to the wheels of her chair. Her gaze paused on the worn coat, the old folder, the muddy tire marks. Then she gave a small laugh through her nose. "Sweetheart," Karen said, "I think you may be in the wrong building." Denise kept her hands folded on the folder. "This is Whitman Hope Center, correct?" "Yes, it is." "Then I'm in the right place." Karen's smile returned, but it had changed shape. It was smaller now, sharper. "The community charity office is 2 blocks down," she said. "They help with applications, transportation vouchers, things like that. This facility is private." A few people in the waiting area looked up. Denise felt the first sting, but she did not show it. "I'm not here for charity," she said. "I have an appointment." Karen tapped one polished nail against the desk. "With who?" "With management. The appointment should be under Carter. Denise Carter." Karen did not move toward the keyboard. She only sighed. "Do you have a referral?" "I have a letter." "Insurance card?" "I was told I wouldn't need one for this meeting." That made Karen's eyebrows lift. "Well, that's not how we do things here." Denise opened the folder and carefully pulled out a cream-colored envelope. It had been folded once, then pressed flat again. The paper inside carried the Whitman Hope Center seal at the top and the date printed clearly beneath it. Denise held it up. "If you check the visitor list, it should be there." Carter. Denise Carter. Karen glanced at the envelope but did not reach for it. "Honey," she said, lowering her voice just enough to sound polite and cruel at the same time. "People walk in here every week saying they have appointments. They say they know a doctor, or a manager, or somebody important. We have rules for a reason." "I understand rules," Denise said. "I followed them. That's why I came at 9:30. It's 9:08. I arrived early." Karen looked past her, toward the wet trail on the marble. "Yes," she said. "I can see that." A young man in a navy suit near the coffee station smirked. A woman beside him whispered something behind her paper cup. Denise heard the soft sound of laughter and felt it land in her chest. She had been laughed at before, in grocery stores when aisles were too narrow, in hospital corridors when nurses spoke over her head instead of to her face, at job interviews when people praised her bravery before telling her the position required someone with more mobility. She had learned how to sit still inside humiliation. She had learned how to keep her voice from shaking. "Ma'am," Denise said, "I'm asking you to check the visitor list. That's all." Karen's face hardened. "And I'm telling you, this lobby is for scheduled patients and approved guests." "I am an approved guest." "Then someone would have called down." "Maybe they did. They didn't. You haven't checked." For the first time, Karen's eyes flashed. The quiet lobby seemed to draw closer. The fountain kept whispering. The rain tapped gently against the tall windows. Somewhere behind Denise, a child coughed. Karen leaned forward over the high counter. "Let me explain something to you," she said. "This is a rehabilitation center, not a walk-in shelter. We have donors coming through this morning. Board members. Families who pay good money for privacy. I can't have anyone rolling in off the street and making people uncomfortable." The words hung there. Rolling in off the street. Denise looked down at her hands. Her fingers had curled around the edge of the folder without her realizing it. She thought of the bus ride that morning. The driver lowering the ramp while impatient passengers stared. She thought of the woman who had stepped around her chair on the sidewalk, careful not to touch her, as if hardship were contagious. She thought of the letter in her folder, and the phone call that had brought her here. "Please come Monday morning, Ms. Carter. Mr. Whitman's family would like to meet you personally." Denise had almost not come. Now she wondered if that had been a warning from somewhere deep inside her. Still, she raised her eyes. "My name is Denise Carter," she said again. "Please check the list." Karen laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "You keep saying that like it's supposed to mean something." Denise did not answer. Because it did mean something. Not to Karen. Not yet. But somewhere upstairs, or maybe across town in a hospital room, that name had been spoken with gratitude. That name had been written on a schedule. That name had been placed on the most important meeting of the morning. Karen simply did not know it. And because she did not know it, she thought she was safe being cruel. She turned slightly toward the computer, and for one brief second Denise thought the woman might finally do the simple thing. Type the name. Read the screen. Make one call. Instead, Karen adjusted the vase of white flowers beside her monitor. I'm not typing one letter, she said. Not until you show me proper documentation. Denise held the envelope higher. This is proper documentation. Karen looked at it like it was a dirty napkin. Anyone can print a letter. It came from this office, so you say. Denise's throat tightened. She swallowed. Behind her, the lobby had gone quiet enough for her to hear the wheels of a medical cart rolling somewhere down the hall. She could feel people watching her now. Not with concern, with curiosity. The way people watch a scene they did not create and do not intend to stop. A receptionist refusing to help a black woman in a wheelchair. A woman in a worn coat trying not to look hurt. A morning turning into something ugly under expensive lights. Denise lowered the envelope back into her folder. All right, she said. May I speak to your manager? Karen's smile vanished again. My manager is busy. With the 9:30 meeting? Karen froze for half a second. It was small, almost nothing. But Denise saw it. The name, the time, the meeting. Somewhere in Karen's mind, pieces had moved close enough to touch, but pride stepped between them. Karen stood up. She was taller than Denise expected. From behind the counter, she looked down with all the confidence of someone who believed the building belonged to people like her. You need to leave, Karen said. Denise's hands went still on her wheels. I have an appointment. You have caused enough disruption. I have asked you one question, and I have answered it. No, Denise said softly. You judged me before you ever touched the keyboard. The words were not loud, but they carried. The woman with the paper cup looked away. The young man in the navy suit stopped smirking. A mother sitting near the children's play corner pulled her little boy closer, not out of fear, but because something in the room had shifted. Karen's cheeks flushed. Don't you dare make this about something it isn't. What is it about then? It's about security. It's about standards. It's about protecting our patients. From me? Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. For a moment, Denise saw the truth sitting plainly between them. Karen was not afraid of her. She was offended by her. Offended that someone in an old coat believed she had the right to enter through the same glass doors as wealthy patients. Offended that a woman in a wheelchair expected to be looked at directly. Offended that Denise Carter had spoken her own name like it belonged on the list. Karen reached for the phone. Denise watched her fingers move. What are you doing? Denise asked. Calling security. The word moved through the lobby like cold air. Denise felt her pulse beat once, hard, in her neck. She thought about turning around, rolling back through the glass doors, letting the rain take her home. It would not be the first time a place had made her feel small enough to leave. But then she thought of the old man in the rain, his hand trembling in hers, his voice breaking as he whispered, "What's your name?" And she remembered answering him, not because she wanted anything, but because she wanted him to know he was not alone. Denise Carter. She had given him her name in kindness. Now she was being denied entry because of it. Karen lifted the receiver and spoke with bright, practiced urgency. Security to the front lobby, please. We have a visitor refusing to leave. Denise looked past her to the computer screen. The visitor list was open. She could see the morning appointments from where she sat, though the letters were small. Names lined the screen in neat rows, black against white. Karen had never even looked. Denise's gaze dropped to the bottom of the screen. There, half hidden behind the vase of white flowers, was a highlighted entry. 9:30 a.m. Emergency beneficiary meeting. Denise Carter. Her name was there. It had been there the whole time. Karen followed her eyes. noticed the screen, and quickly shifted the vase in front of it. Too late. Denise had seen enough. So had no one else. Not yet. The elevator at the far end of the lobby chimed softly, but no one stepped out. The rain kept running down the glass. The fountain kept whispering like it knew a secret. Karen hung up the phone and folded her arms. "Security will be here in a moment," she said. "You can make this easy or embarrassing." Denise looked at the vase hiding her name. Then she looked back at Karen. Her voice was quiet. "You don't know what you just did." Karen tilted her head. "Is that a threat?" "No," Denise said. "It's the truth." And as footsteps approached from the hallway, Denise Carter sat in the middle of that shining lobby, soaked from the rain, judged by strangers, blocked by a woman who refused to type her name, while the most important appointment in the building waited behind a vase of white flowers. 3 hours earlier, Atlanta had still been half asleep. The sky over the south side of the city carried the pale gray color that came before sunrise. Streetlights glowed weakly through the mist. A city bus rattled past rows of aging apartment buildings, and somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed across the wet morning air. Denise Carter was already awake. She sat by the small kitchen window of her apartment, holding a mug of coffee between both hands. The heat warmed her fingers while rain tapped softly against the glass. Her apartment wasn't much. 2 rooms, old floors, a refrigerator that hummed louder than it should, a heater that worked only when it felt like it. But it was hers. And after everything life had taken from her, that mattered. On the wall hung a collection of photographs. A little girl smiling beside a birthday cake. An elderly man wearing a veteran's cap. A teenage boy in a graduation gown. None of them were relatives. They were former patients. People Denise had helped during the years she worked as a community nurse. People who still remembered her. People who still sent Christmas cards. People who still called sometimes just to ask how she was doing. Denise smiled at one photo in particular. Mrs. Jenkins. 83 years old. Stubborn as a mule. Sweet as honey. The woman had once called Denise at midnight because she was convinced raccoons were stealing her tomatoes. Denise had driven across town to check. The raccoons turned out to be her neighbor's chickens. The memory still made her laugh. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text message appeared. "Morning, Miss Denise. Thank you for the soup yesterday." Mama finally ate something. It was from Angela. Single mother. 3 kids. Working 2 jobs. Barely keeping her head above water. Denise typed back. "Tell her I'll bring more tomorrow." A second later, another message arrived. "You always help everybody." Denise looked at the words for a moment. Then she set the phone down. Because the truth was simpler than people thought. Helping people wasn't something she chose. It was who she was. It always had been, even when life stopped being kind to her. Her eyes drifted toward the wheelchair parked beside the table. 10 years. 10 years since the accident. Sometimes it felt like yesterday. Sometimes it felt like another lifetime. She could still remember the ambulance, the rain, the flashing lights, the sound of metal. Then darkness. 4 surgeries. Months of rehabilitation. Doctors speaking in careful voices. Friends promising to visit. Most of them never did. The hardest part wasn't losing her ability to walk. It was discovering how quickly people stopped seeing her. Before the accident, Denise had been Nurse Carter. Reliable, respected, needed. Afterward, she became something else. An inconvenience, a liability, a reminder of things people preferred not to think about. The hospital administrators used softer words, of course. "We're restructuring. We need flexibility. We're considering operational needs." But the result was the same. Her position disappeared. So did her paycheck. And eventually, so did many of the people she'd once called friends. Denise took another sip of coffee. Then she glanced at the envelope resting on the table. The cream-colored paper seemed strangely out of place in her tiny apartment. Elegant, official, important. The return address read Whitman Hope Center. She still didn't fully understand why they wanted to meet her. The call had come 3 days earlier. A polite woman, professional voice. No details, only a request. Mr. Whitman's family would like to meet with you Monday morning. Denise had almost declined. People like the Whitmans didn't usually call people like her. Not for meetings, not for good reasons. But curiosity eventually won. Now the envelope sat waiting beside her coffee cup. A mystery she would soon have to solve. A knock sounded at the door. Denise rolled across the apartment and opened it. Standing outside was a little boy wrapped in a red hoodie, 8 years old, missing one front tooth, his backpack nearly larger than he was. "Morning, Miss Denise." "Morning, Marcus." The boy grinned. "My mom said to give you this." He handed her a paper bag. Inside were 2 homemade biscuits, still warm. Denise laughed. "Your mother knows I can't accept payment. She said it isn't payment." "Then what is it?" Marcus shrugged. "A thank you." Denise felt her throat tighten. Those words always hit harder than people realized. Because gratitude wasn't something she expected. She never helped people hoping to get something back. But every now and then someone remembered. And that made all the difference. She took one biscuit. "Tell your mom I said thank you." Marcus nodded, then hesitated. "You nervous? Nervous about what?" "The fancy meeting." Denise smiled. News traveled fast in the neighborhood. "A little. You'll be okay? You think so?" The boy nodded seriously. "You always help everybody. Good stuff happens to people like that." Then he ran down the hallway before she could answer. Denise watched him go. A strange feeling settled in her chest. Hope. Dangerous. Fragile. Hope had disappointed her before. Still, she couldn't quite let go of it. An hour later, she locked her apartment door. The rain had started again. Cold droplets drifted through the air as she rolled toward the bus stop. People hurried past beneath umbrellas. Most never looked at her. A few smiled. One man held a door open. A woman carrying groceries nodded politely. Small kindnesses. Tiny things. Enough to keep the world from feeling completely cold. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes. The driver lowered the ramp. "Morning, Miss Carter." "Morning, Eddie." She boarded and took her usual place. As Atlanta slid past the windows, Denise stared at the envelope resting in her lap. The city changed block by block. Pawn shops became office buildings. Corner stores became boutiques. Graffiti became glass towers. Eventually, the skyline rose ahead, and somewhere among those shining buildings sat Whitman Hope Center. Waiting. By the time the bus reached downtown, the rain had become steadier. Denise pulled her coat tighter and rolled onto the sidewalk. She looked up. The center stood ahead like something from another world. Tall windows, polished stone, bright banners fluttering in the wind. For a moment she considered turning around, going home, making soup, checking on Mrs. Jenkins, doing anything except walking, or rather rolling, into a place where she didn't belong. Then she remembered Marcus. Good stuff happens to people like that. Denise smiled despite herself. Let's find out. And with the cream-colored envelope resting on her lap, she headed toward the building where a receptionist named Karen Miller was about to make the biggest mistake of her career. But none of that had started that morning. The truth began 7 nights earlier. On a cold Thursday evening, rain swept across Atlanta in silver sheets. The storm had arrived just before sunset, turning streets into rivers of reflected headlights and neon. Wind rattled bus shelters. Storefront signs flickered against the wet darkness. Most people hurried home with their heads down, eager to escape the weather. Denise Carter was on her way back from delivering groceries to an elderly neighbor. The plastic rain cover stretched over her wheelchair snapped in the wind. Water dripped from the edge of her hood. Her shoulders ached from pushing through puddles, but she kept moving. The neighborhood bus stop sat beneath a flickering blue advertisement panel near the edge of downtown. Usually it was crowded. Tonight it was nearly empty. Only 3 people stood beneath the shelter. A young man scrolling through his phone, a woman holding a shopping bag, and an older white man sitting alone on the far bench. Denise barely noticed him at first. He wore a dark overcoat and expensive leather shoes. Rainwater darkened the shoulders of his coat. His silver hair clung damply to his forehead. Something about him looked wrong. Not drunk, not homeless. Wrong. Denise slowed. The man sat motionless. The bus stop lights reflected in puddles around him. Then she saw his hand. It slipped from the bench. His body tilted forward. And suddenly he collapsed. The sound barely registered over the storm. A dull thud. The young man glanced up, looked, then looked back down at his phone. The woman with the shopping bag froze for a second before stepping backward. Nobody moved. Nobody rushed forward. Nobody even spoke. The rain kept falling. Denise stared. The old man was lying half on the sidewalk, half in the gutter. Water pooled around him. His chest moved, but only barely. Oh, Lord. Without thinking, Denise pushed her wheels forward. The curb was uneven. Her chair jolted violently. One wheel slid sideways through a puddle. Still, she kept going. The young man finally looked up again. "I think that guy passed out," he said. Denise almost laughed at the absurdity. "Think?" The man was lying face down in the rain. "Call 911, she shouted. The young man blinked, then looked around as though someone else might handle it. Denise's voice hardened. "Now!" That finally got him moving. He fumbled for his phone. Denise reached the older man. Rainwater soaked through her gloves as she touched his shoulder. "Sir?" No response. She gently rolled him onto his back. His skin was pale, much too pale. His breathing came in short, uneven pulls. Denise had spent 20 years around patients. She knew fear when she saw it, and she knew danger. The old man wasn't intoxicated. He was in medical distress. "Stay with me," she said. The woman with the shopping bag edged closer. "Is he okay?" "No." "What happened?" "I don't know." The woman looked frightened. "Shouldn't we wait for the ambulance?" Denise glanced at her. "If this was your father, would you want people standing around waiting?" The woman immediately knelt beside her. "No." "Then help me." Together, they lifted the man's shoulders enough to keep him from lying in pooled water. The storm intensified. Wind howled between buildings. Cars splashed past. Still, nobody else stopped. Denise removed her coat. The only warm thing she had, the only dry thing she had, and draped it over the stranger's chest. The shopping bag woman stared. "You're going to freeze. He needs it more." The words came automatically, because they were true. The old man's eyelids fluttered. For a moment his eyes opened. Blue, clouded, confused. He looked directly at Denise. "Sir?" she said. His lips moved, No sound came out. Stay with me. The rain ran down Denise's face. Her hair clung to her forehead. She squeezed his hand. A simple human connection. One person refusing to leave another person alone. The old man focused on her voice, on her face, on the warmth in her eyes. What happened? He whispered. You collapsed. His breathing trembled. You don't need to talk. His fingers tightened weakly around hers. For a moment, she thought he might lose consciousness again. Then he managed to force out another question. What is your name? The storm seemed to quiet around them. The traffic, the wind, the sirens in the distance. Everything faded. Only that question remained. Denise smiled. Denise. His eyes stayed on her. Denise Carter. Something changed in his expression, as though he wanted to remember it, needed to remember it. Then his eyes closed again. The woman beside Denise looked worried. Is he dying? No. At least Denise hoped not. The ambulance sirens finally appeared in the distance. Red and blue lights flashed across the wet street. Relief washed through her. Paramedics rushed forward carrying equipment. They immediately took over. One checked his pulse. Another attached monitoring leads. A third asked questions. Are you family? Denise shook her head. No. You know him? No. You stopped to help? Yes. The paramedic nodded, then looked down at the old man. Recognition flashed across his face. A brief look. Gone almost instantly. But Denise noticed. Do you know him? She asked. The paramedic hesitated. Not personally. Then he said nothing more. Within minutes, they loaded the man into the ambulance. The doors closed. The sirens disappeared into the rain. And just like that, he was gone. The shopping bag woman exhaled. You're a good person. Denise laughed softly. No. You sat in a storm holding a stranger's hand. I was a nurse. The woman smiled. Maybe that's the same thing. Denise watched the ambulance vanish into traffic. Something about the entire encounter felt unfinished. Strange. Important. But she couldn't explain why. Eventually, she pulled her chair around. Her coat was gone. Her clothes were soaked. Her hands were numb. And she still had half a mile to travel home. As she rolled away from the bus stop, she glanced back one last time. The empty bench sat beneath the blue glow of the shelter. Rain continued falling. The city continued moving. Nobody knew a life had almost ended there. Nobody knew a simple act of kindness had just altered several futures. Least of all, Denise. She arrived home nearly an hour later. Cold. Exhausted. Hungry. She microwaved leftover soup, wrapped herself in a blanket, and forgot about the stranger. At least she thought she had. 3 days later, while sorting mail at her kitchen table, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, she answered. Hello? A professional female voice responded. May I speak with Denise Carter? This is Denise. Ms. Carter, my name is Lauren Whitman. I'm calling on behalf of the Whitman family. Denise frowned. The name meant nothing to her. I'm sorry? We would like to arrange a meeting with you. A meeting? Yes, ma'am. About what? There was a brief pause. The woman sounded emotional. As strange as this may sound, someone has been looking for you. Denise sat up straighter. Looking for me? Yes. Why? Another pause. Then came the answer. Because you saved his life. And for the first time since that rainy night at the bus stop, Denise Carter thought about the old man again. She had no idea that the stranger she covered with her coat was Richard Whitman, a billionaire, a philanthropist, the founder of one of the largest healthcare networks in the South, and a man who had spent the last 3 days searching Atlanta for the woman who refused to leave him alone in the rain. The cream-colored envelope arrived the next morning, and now, sitting in the lobby of Whitman Hope Center, while Karen Miller treated her like she didn't belong, Denise still had no idea how close she was to learning the truth. But somewhere else in the city, a recovering billionaire had not forgotten her name. Not for a second. Back in the lobby of Whitman Hope Center, the rain continued sliding down the enormous glass windows like silver ribbons. The fountain whispered, the marble floor gleamed, and Denise Carter sat perfectly still while Karen Miller folded her arms behind the reception desk. The atmosphere had changed. People were no longer pretending not to watch. A businessman near the coffee station lowered his newspaper. A woman waiting for physical therapy stopped scrolling on her phone. Even the child near the play corner had gone quiet. Everyone sensed something uncomfortable unfolding, something they weren't sure they should witness. Security hadn't arrived yet, but Karen looked confident enough that it hardly mattered. She believed she had already won. "You can save us both some trouble," Karen said. "Just leave." Denise looked at her. The years had taught her many things. How to live with pain, how to ask for help, how to rebuild a life when everything collapsed. Most importantly, they had taught her patience. "I'm not leaving." Karen exhaled sharply through her nose. "Why are you making this difficult?" Denise almost smiled, because the question sounded so familiar. She had heard it from hospital administrators, insurance representatives, landlords, employers, people who wanted her to disappear politely, people who called surrender cooperation. "I came for a meeting," Denise said. "That's all." Karen tapped her fingernails against the desk. "People like you always say that." The words landed harder than Karen intended, or perhaps exactly as hard as she intended. Several heads turned. The businessman looked uncomfortable. The mother beside the play area frowned. Denise felt the familiar sting. People like you. She knew what Karen meant. Not just black. Not just disabled. Not just poor. People who didn't fit. People who reminded wealthy spaces that suffering existed outside their walls. Karen looked toward the wet wheel marks on the marble. "You tracked mud all over the lobby. It was raining. You could have cleaned the wheels first." Denise glanced toward the entrance. The automatic doors opened and closed as visitors entered from the storm. Nobody else had been asked to clean their shoes. Nobody else had been treated like a problem before speaking. But Denise simply nodded. "I'll clean it when I'm done." Karen laughed. "You're assuming you're staying." Before Denise could answer, a side door opened near the reception desk. A young woman pushing a supply cart emerged from the hallway. She couldn't have been older than 24. Her dark curls were tied back beneath a blue headband. A janitor's badge hung from her uniform. Maya Brooks. She noticed the tension immediately. Everyone did. "What happened?" she asked softly. Karen didn't even look at her. "Nothing that concerns you." Maya's eyes moved to Denise, then to the cream-colored envelope resting on her lap, then back to Karen. Something didn't sit right with her. Denise wasn't shouting, wasn't causing a scene, wasn't demanding anything. She simply looked tired, the kind of tired that came from carrying too much for too long. Maya recognized that look. Her mother wore it every day. Karen noticed Maya lingering. Don't you have floors to mop? Maya hesitated, then nodded, but she didn't leave immediately. She offered Denise a small smile, the first friendly expression Denise had seen since entering the building. It wasn't much, but it mattered. Sometimes kindness arrived in tiny doses. A smile, a door held open, a stranger choosing not to look away. Maya disappeared down the hallway. Karen rolled her eyes. Everybody thinks they're a hero. Denise said nothing. A moment later, the security guard arrived. Tom Harris, mid-50s, broad shoulders, kind face, the sort of man who looked more like a high school football coach than a security officer. He walked into the lobby expecting trouble. Instead, he found a woman in a wheelchair holding an envelope. Tom stopped. His eyes moved from Denise to Karen, then back again. "What's going on?" Karen answered immediately. "This woman is refusing to leave." Tom looked confused. Denise didn't appear threatening. She looked cold and exhausted. "Ma'am?" Tom asked gently. "What's your name?" "Denise Carter." "Ms. Carter, do you have business here today?" "Yes." Karen sighed dramatically. "She's been saying that for 20 minutes. "It hasn't been 20 minutes, Denise replied quietly. Tom looked at Karen. "Then Denise, then the envelope, can I see the paperwork?" Before Denise could hand it over, Karen cut in. "It doesn't matter." Tom blinked. "What do you mean?" "She's not authorized." "Did you check?" Karen's jaw tightened. "I know enough." The answer bothered Tom. Years of security work had taught him something simple. When people were telling the truth, they usually welcomed verification. Karen seemed determined to avoid it. Denise noticed his hesitation. For the first time that morning, a small flicker of hope appeared. Maybe someone would finally listen. Maybe someone would simply read the letter. Then Karen changed tactics. She leaned toward Tom, lowering her voice. "Not enough." Denise still heard every word. "Tom, there are donors arriving today. So, we can't have situations like this." "Situations like this?" Tom looked uncomfortable. "So what exactly do you want me to do?" "I want her removed." The words echoed through the lobby. Removed. Not helped. Not checked in. Not verified. Removed. Denise stared at the fountain. Its water flowed calmly over polished stone. She suddenly remembered another building, another lobby, another receptionist. 10 years earlier, the day she had returned to work after her accident. The woman at the desk had looked confused, then embarrassed, then apologetic. The office wasn't wheelchair accessible. Nobody had thought about that. Nobody had prepared. Nobody expected her back. By the end of that month, she no longer had a job. The memory still hurt. Not because she lost the position, because she lost the illusion that hard work protected people. Sometimes it didn't. Sometimes all it took was one accident, one illness, one bad year, and suddenly the world treated you differently. Tom shifted his weight. "Ms. Carter, yes? Maybe we can figure this out." Karen interrupted. "There is nothing to figure out." Then she pointed at the envelope. "What's even in there?" Denise tightened her grip. "Private documents." Karen smiled. Convenient answer. The businessman near the coffee station finally spoke. "Maybe somebody should just read the letter." The room fell silent. Karen looked annoyed. The businessman shrugged. "It seems simple." "It isn't." "Why not?" Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. because she had no good answer. Only assumptions, and assumptions sounded ugly when spoken out loud. Denise noticed several people watching Karen now. Not her, Karen. The balance in the room had shifted slightly. Not enough, but enough to make Karen nervous, which made her defensive, and defensive people often made mistakes. She stepped around the desk. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble. Denise immediately felt the atmosphere tighten. Karen stopped directly in front of her wheelchair. Too close. Close enough for Denise to smell expensive perfume. Close enough to see irritation burning behind carefully applied makeup. "Let me save everyone some time," Karen said. Her hand moved toward the envelope. Denise pulled it back. "Don't. Then show me what's inside." "No." Karen's smile vanished. The businessman stood up. The mother near the play area looked concerned. Tom took one step forward. Something was about to happen. Everyone felt it. The rain hammered harder against the windows. The fountain whispered. The lobby held its breath. And Karen Miller made a decision she would soon regret. Her hand shot forward, straight toward the envelope resting in Denise Carter's lap. The moment her fingers touched it, every eye in the room turned toward them, and Denise's heart sank. Because she knew exactly what came next, and it wasn't going to be pretty. Karen's fingers closed around the cream-colored envelope. For a brief moment, neither woman moved. The lobby seemed to freeze. The fountain continued its soft murmur. Rain tapped against the giant windows. Somewhere in the building, an elevator chimed. But inside the lobby, every eye was fixed on the same thing. The envelope. Denise tightened her grip. "Don't." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Karen smiled. A thin, irritated smile. "Then show me what's inside. It's private. Convenient." Tom stepped forward. "Karen." She ignored him. The businessman near the coffee station looked uncomfortable. The mother beside the children's corner lowered her eyes. Everyone knew the situation had gone too far. Everyone except Karen. Or perhaps she knew and simply didn't care. That possibility felt worse. Karen tugged harder. The envelope slipped from Denise's hands. A sharp crack of paper echoed through the lobby. Then the contents spilled. Documents slid across polished marble. One page spun beneath a sofa. Another drifted toward the fountain. A third landed face up several feet away. Silence. Absolute silence. For a second, even Karen looked surprised. Not guilty, just surprised. Like a child who breaks something expensive and suddenly realizes people are watching. Denise stared at the scattered papers. A familiar ache settled behind her ribs. Not anger. Not yet. Something older. Humiliation. The kind that arrived quietly. The kind that burned slowly. The kind she'd experienced too many times to count. 10 years earlier, she would have shouted, demanded respect, demanded fairness. Life had taught her something different. Most people revealed themselves eventually. You just had to let them keep talking. Karen crossed her arms. "There." Her voice rang across the room. "If you have legitimate business here, nobody's stopping you from proving it." Tom looked horrified. "Karen, come on!" "What? You dumped her paperwork." "I didn't dump anything." Several people exchanged glances. They had all seen it. Everyone knew exactly what happened, but most remained silent. Because speaking up was uncomfortable, and silence was easier. Denise slowly lowered her gaze toward the floor. The pages were scattered everywhere. To someone standing, gathering them would have taken less than 30 seconds. To Denise, it was something else entirely. She released a long breath. Then she began. one page at a time. She locked her wheelchair, leaned sideways, reached. Her shoulder immediately protested. Pain shot down her arm. The old injury never completely disappeared. Rainy days always made it worse. Today was no exception. Still, she stretched farther. Her fingertips brushed the first page. She grabbed it, pulled herself upright, placed it on her lap, then reached again. The second page lay farther away, near a decorative table. The movement required more effort. Her muscles trembled, but she refused to ask for help. Not because she was proud, because she was tired. Tired of being treated like a burden. Tired of being looked at with pity. Tired of proving she deserved basic dignity. She reached again. The page remained inches away, and suddenly another hand appeared. A young hand. Steady, kind. Maya Brooks. The janitor knelt beside her. Without speaking, Maya picked up the paper and placed it gently on Denise's lap. Denise looked at her. Maya smiled. A small smile. The kind that asks permission. The kind that says, "I'm here if you need me." "Thank you," Denise whispered. "You're welcome." Karen's voice cracked across the lobby. "Maya!" The young woman froze. Karen's eyes narrowed. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Maya slowly stood, helping. The answer came so naturally that several people glanced toward her. Karen looked stunned, as though nobody had challenged her in years. "You are not authorized to involve yourself." She's picking papers off the floor. And she shouldn't have to do it alone. Karen laughed. A short, sharp sound. "You want to risk your job over this?" The question hung in the air. Maya swallowed. For the first time, uncertainty appeared on her face. Because Karen wasn't entirely bluffing. Maya needed this job. Her mother depended on her paycheck. Student loans sat on her kitchen table. Rent was due next week. Life didn't leave room for brave mistakes. Karen knew that. She was counting on it. "Get back to work." Maya hesitated. Denise saw the conflict in her eyes. The fear, the kindness, the calculation. She recognized it immediately. Most good people knew that look. The moment where doing the right thing suddenly became expensive. Denise offered a gentle smile. "It's okay." Maya looked at her. "No, it isn't." The answer surprised everyone, including Karen. Especially Karen. The young woman stepped forward again, then bent down, picked up another page, then another, one by one. The lobby watched. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. But something subtle shifted. The balance of the room. The emotional center. Because courage is contagious. Sometimes all it takes is one person. Karen's face darkened. "Maya." The warning carried more force this time. Maya stood. The papers rested safely in Denise's lap. For several seconds, nobody said anything. Then a soft voice spoke from across the lobby. "Can I help too?" Everyone turned. The voice belonged to a little boy, perhaps 8 years old. Thin legs, physical therapy braces, freckles. He sat beside his mother near the children's area. The mother looked horrified. "Jason!" But the boy wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Denise. She dropped her papers. The innocence in his voice landed like a hammer. Not because it was loud, because it was true. Children often tell the truth adults spend hours avoiding. The lobby fell silent again. The boy frowned. His eyes moved between Denise and Karen. Then he asked the question. The simple question. The honest question. The question nobody wanted to answer. Why isn't anybody helping her? The room froze. Even Karen. Especially Karen. Because there was no professional response, no policy, no script, no clever explanation. Only reality. And reality sounded ugly when spoken by a child. The boy's mother gently pulled him closer, but the damage had already been done. Several people lowered their eyes. The businessman looked embarrassed. An elderly woman near the fountain shook her head quietly. Tom Harris exhaled heavily. Something had changed. Karen could feel it. The crowd was slipping away from her, which only made her more defensive, more determined, more reckless. She pointed toward Denise. "This isn't what it looks like." Nobody answered, because everyone knew exactly what it looked like. Karen's cheeks reddened. Her voice sharpened. "She came in here making demands." Denise finally spoke. "I asked you to type my name." The words landed softly, yet somehow they sounded louder than Karen's entire speech. Karen looked away first, only for a second. But Denise noticed. Tom noticed. The businessman noticed. Everyone noticed. Karen had begun losing control, and she hated it. The receptionist turned toward Tom. "Why are we still talking about this?" Tom frowned. "Because something feels wrong." "Nothing is wrong." "Then check the visitor list." Karen's jaw tightened. There it was again. The one request she refused to fulfill. The simplest solution in the building. Type the name. Read the screen. Make a call. 30 seconds. Maybe less. Yet she refused. Because somewhere deep inside, Karen had already built a story about Denise, and she feared evidence more than ignorance. Tom looked toward the computer, then toward Denise, then back toward Karen. The silence stretched. Rain hammered the windows. The fountain whispered. The little boy continued staring, waiting. Karen finally snapped. "Fine." Everyone looked up. For one brief second, Denise thought reason had won, that Karen would finally sit down. Type the name. End the entire nightmare. Instead, Karen pointed directly at Denise. "Call security backup." Tom blinked. "What?" "You heard me." "Backup for what?" Karen's eyes hardened. "For a trespasser who refuses to leave." The word hit the room like ice. Trespasser. Denise felt something inside her sink. Not because she was afraid, because she suddenly realized how far Karen was willing to go. And as Tom reached for the radio clipped to his shoulder, Denise glanced toward the elevators at the far end of the lobby. The silver doors remained closed, unmoving, silent. She had no way of knowing that upstairs, events were already unfolding, that a phone call was about to change everything, that somewhere inside the building, someone had just discovered her name was missing from a meeting room, and that within minutes, the truth would come racing toward the lobby faster than anyone could imagine, especially Karen Miller. But nobody in the lobby knew that yet. Not Denise, not Tom, not the little boy sitting beside his mother, and certainly not Karen herself. The rain continued falling outside, turning the city into a blur of silver and gray beyond the glass walls. Inside Whitman Hope Center, the air felt heavier with every passing second. Tom's hand rested on the radio clipped to his shoulder. Karen stood behind the reception desk with her chin lifted, convinced she was still in control. Denise sat quietly in her wheelchair, the scattered documents now gathered once more on her lap. The envelope looked slightly bent. One corner had been creased. It shouldn't have bothered her. It was only paper. Yet somehow it did, because it represented something bigger. Respect. Dignity. The simple belief that another human being deserved basic courtesy. Karen hadn't damaged the envelope. She had damaged something else. Something harder to repair. Tom looked toward Denise, then toward Karen, then back again. This is getting out of hand. Karen folded her arms. No. It's being handled. Handled? Yes. You humiliated a visitor. Karen's eyes narrowed. She's not a visitor. The businessman near the coffee station shook his head slightly. The elderly woman by the fountain sighed. Even the atmosphere itself seemed tired, like the building had grown weary of listening. Denise remained silent. That bothered Karen more than any argument could have. People were supposed to defend themselves, raise their voices, lose their tempers, give her a reason. Instead, Denise simply sat there, calm, patient, steady. The longer she stayed composed, the worse Karen looked. A side door opened. Maya emerged again. This time she carried a tray of bottled water intended for patients in physical therapy. She paused when she saw the scene. Nothing had improved. If anything, it had become worse. Her eyes moved toward Denise. The older woman looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Maya recognized that kind of exhaustion. She'd seen it on her mother's face after 12-hour shifts. She'd seen it in the mirror during difficult years. Without asking permission, Maya grabbed a bottle of water from the tray. Karen noticed immediately. Maya. The young woman ignored her. She walked straight toward Denise. The lobby watched. Every eye followed her. Tom watched. The businessman watched. Even the little boy watched. Maya stopped beside the wheelchair and held out the bottle. Here. Denise looked up. You don't have to do that. I know. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither woman said anything. Then Denise accepted the bottle. Thank you. You're welcome. The exchange lasted less than 10 seconds, yet somehow it felt bigger than everything else that morning. Because kindness always stands out when cruelty dominates a room. Karen's face tightened. What exactly do you think you're doing? Maya turned, giving her water. She's not supposed to be here. She's still a person. The words landed harder than Maya intended, or maybe exactly as hard as she intended. Karen took a step forward. I've already warned you. About helping somebody, about interfering. Maya laughed softly. Not a mocking laugh, a confused one. Asking if someone needs water is interfering now? Karen didn't answer immediately. Because there wasn't a good answer. Only an ugly one. And ugly things sound worse when spoken aloud. The little boy near the play area smiled. His mother squeezed his shoulder. The businessman looked down at his shoes, hiding a grin. Karen noticed. Her authority was slipping, and she hated it. You already have 2 write-ups this quarter. The threat hung in the air. Maya's smile faded. Denise saw it happen. Saw the worry return. Saw reality arrive. Jobs mattered. Paychecks mattered. Kindness did not always pay rent. Denise tightened her grip on the water bottle. Maya. The young woman turned. It's okay. No, it isn't. It will be. Maya looked unconvinced. Denise smiled gently. Trust me. For reasons she couldn't explain, Maya did. She stepped back. Not because Karen had ordered her, because Denise asked her to. Karen looked irritated by that too. Everything seemed to irritate her now. The elderly woman beside the fountain suddenly stood. She had remained quiet most of the morning. Silver hair, blue cardigan, walking cane, the kind of person people often overlooked. She slowly approached the reception desk. Karen immediately switched into her customer service smile. The transformation was almost impressive. Almost. "Ma'am, can I help you?" The woman pointed toward Denise. "You could start by helping her." The smile vanished. A few people looked away to hide their reactions. The elderly woman continued. "I've been sitting there for 20 minutes. Karen's expression stiffened. And I've watched everything." Nobody spoke. The fountain murmured quietly. The rain tapped the windows. The woman looked directly at Karen. "You've been rude." Karen blinked. "You don't understand the situation." "I understand enough." The older woman tapped her cane once against the marble. "People tell you who they are when they think nobody important is watching." The sentence settled over the lobby. Karen looked stunned. The elderly woman turned away before Karen could answer. Then she returned to her seat. The silence afterward felt enormous. Tom rubbed the back of his neck. Something about the entire situation bothered him more with every passing minute. His instincts kept whispering the same thing. Something was wrong. Not with Denise. With the story. The pieces didn't fit. Why would someone arrive carrying official documents? Why would she calmly request verification? Why would she repeatedly ask for the visitor list? Most importantly, why was Karen so determined not to check? Tom glanced toward the reception computer. The screen remained open. Visitor appointments filled the display. A simple search would settle everything. Yet Karen refused. That refusal told him more than any explanation could. His radio crackled. A brief burst of static. Then silence. Tom barely noticed. His attention remained fixed on Denise. The woman sat quietly twisting the cap off her water bottle. No anger. No accusations. No threats. Just patience. An uncomfortable realization crept into Tom's mind. If their positions were reversed, he wasn't sure he'd be handling it half as well. The little boy suddenly spoke again. "Miss?" Denise looked over. "Yes?" "You saved somebody, didn't you?" His mother looked embarrassed. "Jason." But the boy continued. "I can tell." A few people smiled. Denise tilted her head. "What makes you think that?" The boy shrugged. "Good people look different." The answer drew soft laughter from several corners of the lobby. Even Denise laughed. A genuine laugh. The first one all morning. For a brief moment the tension cracked. Just enough to let light through. Karen looked furious. Because the room was no longer with her. It was drifting away. Toward Denise. Toward Maya. Toward the little boy. Toward basic human decency. And Karen couldn't stop it. Then something happened. At first nobody noticed. Not Karen, not Denise, not Tom. Only Maya. She happened to glance toward the elevator bank at the far end of the lobby. The private elevator. The one executives used. Its indicator light flashed. Then began descending rapidly. 30. 27. 23. 20. Maya frowned. Someone important was coming down. Fast. Very fast. The elevator had bypassed every floor. No stops, no delays. Straight to the lobby. A strange feeling settled in her stomach. The same feeling she'd had right before storms. The feeling that something was about to change. Across the room, Tom's radio crackled again. This time a voice emerged. Urgent. Breathless. "Tom, hold everything." Tom straightened immediately. "Repeat, hold everything." Karen frowned. "What is it?" The radio voice continued. "Do not remove the woman in the wheelchair." Tom looked toward Denise, then toward Karen, then back at the radio. Why? Several seconds of static followed. Then came the answer, and the answer made Tom's eyes widen. Because somewhere upstairs, someone had finally looked at a name. Denise Carter. And panic had begun spreading through the building. The message crackling through Tom Harris's radio lasted only a few seconds, but it changed everything. Tom, do not remove her. Repeat, do not remove the woman in the wheelchair. Someone from administration is on the way down. Static followed, then silence. Tom stared at the radio. Karen stared at Tom. The lobby stared at both of them. What was that? Karen asked. Tom didn't answer immediately, because he wasn't sure what he had just heard. Only that the tone on the other end hadn't sounded routine. It had sounded urgent, very urgent. Karen stepped closer. What did they say? Tom finally looked up. They said not to remove her. The words landed heavily. A murmur moved through the lobby. The businessman by the coffee station exchanged a glance with the elderly woman near the fountain. Maya froze beside her supply cart. Even little Jason seemed to sense something important had shifted. Karen forced a laugh. That's ridiculous. Tom didn't respond. Instead, he looked toward Denise. For the first time all morning, he felt embarrassed. Not because he had done anything cruel, because he had stood there and allowed it to happen. Denise remained calm. She held the water bottle Maya had given her and watched the rain slide down the windows. Years ago, moments like this would have made her anxious. Now they simply made her tired. Very tired. Karen marched back behind the desk. Well, whoever called is obviously confused. Tom frowned. Maybe. There's no maybe. Karen tapped the desk. She's not supposed to be here. Denise finally spoke. Then why am I on the visitor list? Karen's eyes flashed. The question hit exactly where Denise intended. Because Karen still hadn't checked, still hadn't typed the name, still hadn't done the one thing that could have ended everything. The silence that followed felt uncomfortable. Karen hated uncomfortable silences. They gave people time to think, and thinking was becoming dangerous. She grabbed the desk phone. I'm calling administration myself. Tom watched carefully. Good. Karen dialed. The line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then someone answered. Karen immediately switched to her polished professional voice. This is Karen at reception. We have a situation in the lobby and... She stopped. Her expression changed. Only slightly. But enough. Excuse me? Another pause. Karen glanced toward Denise, then away. What do you mean she's expected? The entire lobby seemed to lean forward. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Karen listened. The color slowly drained from her face. Not much. Just enough. A crack appearing in a wall. Then the call ended. Karen lowered the receiver. Tom noticed immediately. So? Karen cleared her throat. They're checking. The answer sounded weak. Because it was. Tom had worked security long enough to recognize a person trying to regain control. Karen wasn't certain anymore. And uncertainty frightened her. Meanwhile, 30 floors above the lobby, confusion had become alarm. A conference room filled with administrators sat waiting around a polished table. Coffee cups steamed beside folders. A presentation screen glowed quietly at the front of the room. But nobody was discussing presentations anymore. A woman in her 40s hurried through the doorway carrying a tablet. Lauren Whitman, executive assistant to the Whitman family. She isn't here. The room went silent. Michael Whitman looked up immediately. What do you mean she isn't here? Lauren placed the tablet on the table. Denise Carter never checked in. Michael frowned. Her meeting started 15 minutes ago. I know. Did somebody call her? 3 times. The room grew still. Michael stood. A bad feeling hit him instantly. His father had spent days searching for Denise Carter. Days. The entire meeting existed because of her. Without her, none of them would even be sitting in that room. Where is she? Lauren swallowed. The lobby. Michael froze. The lobby? A second employee nodded. Security says there's some kind of issue downstairs. Michael grabbed his phone. What kind of issue? Nobody answered. Because nobody knew, not yet. Back downstairs, Karen was beginning to lose the room. The businessman near the coffee station finally stood. I think she deserves an apology. Karen looked at him like he'd insulted her. For what? The elderly woman answered before he could. For treating her like garbage. Several people nodded. Karen couldn't believe it. An hour ago she controlled the entire lobby. Now strangers were openly challenging her. And the reason sat quietly in a wheelchair drinking water. Denise wasn't trying to win people over. She wasn't performing. She wasn't defending herself. She was simply existing. And somehow that made Karen look worse every minute. The receptionist felt something she rarely experienced. Fear. Not fear of Denise. Fear of being wrong. Because if Denise truly belonged there, if there really was a meeting, then every choice Karen had made that morning suddenly looked different. The elevator indicator blinked. Maya noticed first. The private elevator, descending rapidly. 22, 19, 15. No stops. Straight down. Tom noticed too. Something about the speed unsettled him. Executives didn't run. Executives didn't rush. Yet whoever was inside that elevator clearly was. Jason pointed. Look. Everyone turned. The numbers continued falling. 10, 9, 8. Karen folded her arms, trying to appear confident, trying to convince herself she still was. Denise watched quietly. A strange feeling settled in her chest. Not hope. Not yet. Something closer to curiosity, because she still didn't know why she had been invited. Still didn't know why Richard Whitman's family wanted to meet her. Still didn't know how deeply that rainy night had affected a man she'd never met before. The elevator reached 3, then 2, then 1. The lobby became silent. Even the fountain seemed quieter. The doors slid open. Nobody stepped out. For half a second, confusion spread across the room. Then a voice echoed from inside. Where is she? The voice was sharp, breathless, urgent. A tall man in a navy suit appeared. Mid-40s, dark hair, no smile, no patience, only determination. Michael Whitman crossed the lobby faster than anyone thought possible. His eyes scanned the room, the reception desk, the security guard, the visitors. Then finally, Denise. Everything stopped. Michael's expression changed instantly. Relief, shock, disbelief, all at once. He moved toward her. Karen stepped forward. Mr. Whitman, I can explain. He didn't even look at her, not once. His attention never left Denise Carter. And for the first time that morning, Karen Miller realized she might have made a mistake, much larger than a missed appointment. Because the man walking toward Denise wasn't merely an administrator. He was the son of Richard Whitman. And judging by the look on his face, Denise Carter wasn't just another visitor. Not even close. Michael Whitman crossed the lobby so quickly that several people instinctively stepped out of his way. The room had changed. Just seconds earlier, everyone had been watching Denise. Now they were watching him. The son of Richard Whitman rarely appeared in the public lobby. Most employees only saw him in photographs, annual meetings, or company newsletters. Yet here he was, breathing hard, tie slightly crooked, phone still clutched in one hand, looking as though he'd run through half the building. Karen immediately straightened her posture. "Mr. Whitman, there seems to have been some confusion." Michael walked right past her, didn't slow down, didn't acknowledge her, didn't even glance in her direction. He stopped directly in front of Denise. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The lobby held its breath. Denise looked up. Michael looked down at the woman in the wheelchair. The woman his father had talked about every day for the past week. The woman who had become the center of countless conversations. The woman they had searched for across Atlanta. "You are Denise Carter?" His voice sounded almost cautious. Denise nodded. "Yes." The relief that washed across Michael's face was immediate, genuine, visible. The kind of relief people feel when they finally find something they thought they'd lost. "Oh, thank God." The words escaped before he could stop them. A ripple moved through the crowd. Karen blinked. Tom frowned. Maya's eyes widened. Michael looked around the lobby. His gaze landed on the scattered tension hanging in the room. The uncomfortable faces, the documents in Denise's lap, the security guard, the reception desk. Then finally Karen. His expression changed. "What happened?" Nobody answered immediately. Karen recovered first. "Nothing serious." Tom actually laughed. One short, disbelieving laugh. Karen shot him a glare. Michael noticed. His eyes narrowed. "Nothing serious?" Karen smiled nervously. There was simply some confusion regarding visitor verification. Michael looked at Denise. "Is that what happened?" Denise could have unloaded everything. She could have described every insult, every humiliation, every assumption. Instead, she simply said the truth. "I asked her to check the visitor list." Silence. Michael slowly turned toward Karen. Karen suddenly wished the floor would open beneath her feet. "Karen." His voice remained calm, dangerously calm. "Did you check the visitor list?" Karen swallowed. The answer should have been simple. Yes. Or no. Instead, she hesitated. That hesitation told everyone everything. Michael stared at her. "You didn't." Karen opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I had concerns." "What concerns?" She arrived without. "What concerns?" The second question landed harder. Karen's confidence cracked. People noticed. The businessman noticed. The elderly woman noticed. Tom noticed. Maya definitely noticed. For the first time all morning, Karen looked uncertain. Michael looked toward the reception desk, toward the computer screen, then toward the vase of white flowers partially blocking the monitor. He walked around the desk. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound came from the fountain and the rain. Michael sat at the workstation, touched the keyboard, typed 6 letters. Carter. Then one first name. Denise. The search result appeared instantly. Bright yellow. Impossible to miss. The room seemed to shrink. Everyone could see it reflected on the monitor. Emergency beneficiary meeting. Denise Carter. 9:30 a.m. Priority guest. Escort required. Michael stared at the screen, then slowly closed his eyes. Not from confusion, from disbelief. The appointment had been there all morning, exactly where Denise said it would be, exactly where Karen refused to look. When Michael opened his eyes again, The disappointment on his face hurt far more than anger would have. Oh my God. Karen's stomach dropped. The businessman lowered his newspaper completely. The elderly woman shook her head. Tom looked away. Maya quietly covered her mouth. Michael stood, turned toward Denise. Then something happened nobody expected. He apologized, immediately, publicly, without excuses. Ms. Carter, I am so sorry. The sincerity in his voice stunned the room. My father asked me personally to make sure you were welcomed here. Denise watched him carefully. She could tell the apology was real. The best apologies usually were. They arrived without conditions, without explanations, without self-defense, just truth. Michael continued, You should never have been treated this way. Karen felt every eye turn toward her. She hated it, absolutely hated it. Mr. Whitman, not now. The words were quiet, but final. Karen fell silent. Michael crouched slightly to speak at Denise's eye level. A small gesture, a respectful gesture, the kind Karen never once considered. My father has been asking about you every day. Denise frowned. Why? A smile appeared on Michael's face. Not a business smile, a human one. Because he believes you're the reason he's alive. The lobby froze. Several people literally stopped breathing. Tom blinked. Maya looked from Michael to Denise. The businessman whispered something under his breath. Karen stared. No. That couldn't be right. Could it? Denise herself looked confused. I don't understand. Michael glanced toward the elevator, then back at her. You helped an older man during a storm last week. Understanding flashed across Denise's face. The bus stop. Michael nodded. The bus stop. A wave of realization rolled through the room. The elderly woman smiled softly. Jason looked delighted. Tom suddenly remembered the story from local news reports. Richard Whitman's medical emergency. The city had talked about it for days. Nobody had known who helped him. Until now. Michael continued. Most people walked away. Denise looked down. It wasn't a big deal. That answer actually made Michael laugh. The kind of laugh people make when they hear something absurd. It was a very big deal. His eyes softened. My father doesn't remember much from that night. The room remained silent. Listening. He remembers rain. Michael swallowed. He remembers being scared. Another pause. He remembers waking up and seeing someone refuse to leave him alone. Denise looked away. The memory returned. The storm. The cold. The stranger's hand. Then Michael delivered the sentence that changed everything. He remembered your name. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Even Karen seemed frozen. Michael reached into his suit jacket, pulled out his phone, touched the screen, then turned it toward Denise. A video call connected. The image flickered, then stabilized. A hospital room appeared. White walls, soft lighting, medical monitors, and sitting upright in the bed, Richard Whitman. The billionaire himself, older than the photographs, more tired, but unmistakably alive. The second he saw Denise, his eyes brightened. There she is. The room fell completely silent. Richard smiled. A genuine smile. The smile of someone seeing an old friend. Miss Carter. Denise stared at the screen. Hello? Richard shook his head. For several seconds he couldn't speak. Emotion caught him unexpectedly. Finally he managed a quiet laugh. You have no idea how hard we've been trying to find you." And across the lobby, Karen Miller felt something cold settle deep inside her stomach, because she finally understood. Denise Carter wasn't just expected. She wasn't just important. She wasn't just a guest. She was the woman the Whitman family had been searching for all week. And everyone in the lobby was about to learn exactly why. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sounds came from the fountain, the rain against the glass, and the faint electronic hum of Richard Whitman's hospital monitor. The billionaire's face filled Michael's phone screen. He looked older than the photographs that appeared in business magazines. More fragile. More human. Yet there was something unmistakable in his eyes when he looked at Denise. Gratitude. Real gratitude. Not the polished kind wealthy people displayed at charity dinners. Something deeper, something earned. Richard smiled. "Miss Carter." Denise felt strangely uncomfortable, not because she was afraid, because she wasn't used to being the center of attention. "I'm glad you're feeling better," she said. Richard laughed softly. The sound carried through the lobby speakers. "That's the first thing you say?" Denise shrugged. "You were the one lying in the rain." Several people smiled. Even Tom. Richard shook his head. "For 7 days, every person around me has been talking about me." His eyes softened. "You're the first person who's asked how I'm doing." The statement landed quietly across the room. Karen wished it hadn't, because every sentence seemed to make Denise look better, and every sentence seemed to make Karen look worse. Richard continued, "I owe you an apology." Denise blinked. "Why would you apologize?" "Because my family invited you here." His gaze shifted briefly. Toward the lobby, toward the reception desk, toward Karen. Then back again. And this happened. The disappointment in his voice hurt more than anger. Michael lowered his eyes. Karen suddenly found the marble floor fascinating. Neither wanted to meet Richard's gaze. Denise took a slow breath. "It wasn't your fault." "No." Richard nodded. "It wasn't." The answer surprised everyone, especially Karen. Richard wasn't interested in excuses, wasn't interested in shifting blame. He knew exactly where responsibility belonged. Then he looked directly at Denise. "I remember very little about that night." The room fell silent again. Everyone listened. "I remember rain." A pause. "I remember not being able to breathe." Another pause. "I remember people walking by." The billionaire's voice grew quieter. "And I remember one person stopping." Denise looked down. The memory felt distant now. A cold bus stop. A storm. A stranger. Nothing more. To her, it had been one difficult evening among thousands. To Richard, it had become something else entirely. "I don't think you understand what happened." Denise smiled. "I helped somebody." "You stayed," Richard corrected gently. "That's different." His eyes glistened slightly. "When you've spent your entire life surrounded by people, you assume somebody will always be there." The lobby remained perfectly still. "When I woke up in the hospital, the doctors told me how close it had been." Michael swallowed. He'd heard this story already, yet it still affected him. Richard continued, "The first thing I asked was whether anyone knew who helped me." Denise looked genuinely confused. "Why?" The question drew soft laughter from several people, because only Denise would ask why. Richard laughed too. "Because I wanted to thank her." His expression became serious. and because I couldn't stop thinking about something. What? You never asked who I was. The answer hung in the air. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Richard smiled sadly. Most people know who I am. A pause. Some people help because of that. Another pause. You helped because you thought I needed help. The difference mattered. Everyone could hear it. Everyone could feel it. Tom glanced toward Denise, then toward the little boy, then toward Maya. The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Denise wasn't special because she saved a billionaire. She was special because she would have done exactly the same thing for anyone. Rich, poor, black, white, nobody, everybody. Richard cleared his throat. Michael. Yes, Dad? Read it. The lobby looked confused. Michael nodded immediately. He reached into a leather portfolio he had carried down from the executive floor. Then he removed a thick, cream-colored document. Karen's stomach tightened. Something important was coming. She could feel it. Michael unfolded the first page. His voice echoed across the lobby. Official resolution of the Whitman Family Foundation. The businessman straightened in his chair. The elderly woman adjusted her glasses. Tom frowned. Maya leaned forward. Even Jason stopped fidgeting. Michael continued reading. Effective immediately, the Whitman Family Foundation establishes a $20 million rehabilitation and accessibility initiative dedicated to expanding treatment opportunities for underserved patients throughout Georgia. A murmur spread through the room. $20 million. Even Karen looked stunned. But Michael wasn't finished. The initiative shall be permanently known as the Denise Carter Recovery Fund. Silence. Complete silence. Denise stared, certain she had misheard. The businessman lowered his newspaper completely. The elderly woman covered her mouth. Tom looked like someone had hit the pause button on his brain. Maya's eyes filled with tears. Jason grinned. That's her name. His mother nodded. Yes, sweetheart. The little boy smiled even wider. Cool. A few people laughed softly. The tension finally cracked. But Karen couldn't laugh, because all she could think about was the last hour. Every insult, every assumption, every opportunity she'd ignored. Richard watched Denise carefully. I wanted to ask your permission before announcing it publicly. Denise still seemed shocked. You named it after me? Yes. Why? Richard smiled. The answer came immediately. Because people should know what kindness looks like. The lobby grew quiet once more. Denise looked away, embarrassed, overwhelmed, uncomfortable with praise. All emotions she handled poorly. You don't need to do that. I know. Richard's smile widened. That's one of the reasons we're doing it. A few people laughed again. Then Richard exchanged a glance with Michael. A silent understanding passed between father and son. There was still one more thing. The most important thing. Michael unfolded another document. Thicker, more official, bearing legal signatures, corporate seals, board authorization. Richard nodded. Go ahead. Michael looked directly at Denise. This is the part we originally invited you here for. Karen's pulse accelerated. She didn't know why, but she suddenly felt very cold. The businessman sensed it too. Everyone did. Something bigger was coming. Much bigger. Michael cleared his throat. Following review by the Whitman Family Foundation, Whitman Hope Center, and the Board of Accessibility Services, he paused, then continued. We are formally offering Denise Carter the position of Community Accessibility Advisor. The room reacted immediately. Murmurs, surprise, disbelief. Tom looked impressed. Maya smiled. The elderly woman nodded approvingly, but Michael wasn't finished. The position reports directly to executive leadership. Another pause. It includes full benefits. Another pause. Decision-making authority regarding accessibility improvements and patient advocacy programs. Now the room truly understood. This wasn't a ceremonial title. This wasn't charity. This wasn't a publicity stunt. This was power. Real power. Influence. Authority. The ability to change things. The ability to make sure people like Denise never experienced this morning again. Karen felt her throat tighten, because suddenly she realized something terrifying. The woman she'd spent an hour humiliating wasn't simply important. She was about to become one of the most influential voices inside the building, and Denise hadn't said a single cruel thing in return. Not one. That somehow made everything worse. Richard smiled through the screen. "Miss Carter." Denise looked up. "Yes? What do you think?" The entire lobby waited. The rain, the fountain, the hospital monitor. Everything seemed to pause, waiting for her answer. And Karen Miller realized that whatever Denise Carter said next could change far more than her own future. It could change the future of Whitman Hope Center itself. The lobby stood frozen. Rain traced silver lines across the glass walls. The fountain whispered over polished stone. Richard Whitman's image glowed from Michael's phone screen, and every person in the room waited for Denise Carter's answer. Denise looked down at the documents resting in her lap, then at the faces surrounding her. The businessman, the elderly woman, Tom, Maya, the little boy named Jason, even Karen, especially Karen. An hour earlier, Karen hadn't wanted to type her name. Now she couldn't look away from her. Life could turn strangely fast, sometimes faster than anyone expected. Richard smiled patiently from the hospital room. "What do you think?" Denise took a breath. A long one, the kind people take when they know a single sentence matters. Then she looked directly at Richard. "I think it's too much." Several people laughed softly. Not because the answer was funny, because it sounded exactly like Denise. Michael rubbed his forehead. His father laughed outright. "I knew she'd say that. You don't need to name anything after me." Richard shook his head. "That's not your decision." The warmth in his voice made several people smile. Denise sighed. "You built all of this." Richard glanced around his hospital room, then toward the lobby visible through Michael's camera. "No." He paused. "I built buildings." The room grew quiet. "You reminded me why they exist." Nobody spoke after that, because there wasn't much to add. The truth had already landed. Denise looked away, embarrassed. The attention still felt uncomfortable. She spent her life helping people quietly, without cameras, without announcements, without awards. Now an entire lobby was staring at her, and she hated it. Richard seemed to recognize that. His expression softened. "There's something else." Michael immediately picked up another folder. This one looked different, older, thicker, more official. Richard nodded toward it. The lawyers prepared it. The word lawyers instantly caught everyone's attention. Karen's stomach tightened again. Something about the morning kept getting worse. Michael opened the folder. Several pages carried signatures, legal seals, official stamps, the kind of documents that changed lives. Denise frowned. What is that? Richard leaned back slightly against his hospital pillows. After I left surgery, I updated my living will. The room became silent again. Even the fountain seemed quieter. A living will. Those words carried weight, especially from a man who had nearly died. Richard continued. When something like that happens, he glanced toward the heart monitor beside his bed. You start thinking differently. Nobody interrupted. When I was lying there, I kept asking myself a question. His eyes moved toward Denise. What kind of person risks their own comfort for a complete stranger? Denise lowered her gaze. The answer seemed obvious to her. A decent person. Nothing more. But Richard clearly saw it differently. He smiled. So I asked my team to learn who Denise Carter really was. A ripple moved through the lobby. Michael looked toward Denise. I don't think you're aware of what they found. Denise blinked. Found. Richard nodded. Yes. The billionaire exchanged a glance with his son. Then Michael began reading. Former community nurse. Denise shifted uncomfortably. Volunteer medical outreach coordinator. The businessman listened carefully. The elderly woman smiled. Maya looked fascinated. Michael continued. 5,000 documented volunteer service hours. Several eyebrows rose. Tom whistled quietly. Denise looked embarrassed. That's over many years. But Michael wasn't finished. Created free medication delivery routes during the pandemic. A pause. Personally transported elderly patients to appointments when public transit failed. Another pause. Maintained an emergency food network serving low-income families. Jason's mother slowly shook her head in disbelief. The list kept going, and going, and going. Each item revealed another piece of Denise's life, another act of kindness, another sacrifice, another reason people remembered her. Eventually, Michael lowered the papers. The lobby remained silent. Richard smiled. You've spent 20 years helping people. Denise shrugged. So have a lot of nurses. Not like that. The answer came immediately. Richard looked toward his son. Read the last page. Michael turned to the back of the file, then stopped. Even he looked emotional. Denise noticed. What is it? Michael smiled. This one is my favorite. He cleared his throat, then read aloud. Reference statement submitted by Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins, age 83. Denise immediately recognized the name. Oh no. The lobby laughed. Michael continued reading. Miss Denise once drove across Atlanta at midnight because I thought raccoons were stealing my tomatoes. The room erupted into laughter. Even Richard laughed. Denise covered her face. Oh, she's telling that story now? Michael nodded. They turned out to be chickens. More laughter. Most people would have called me crazy. Denise brought a flashlight and helped me look anyway. The laughter softened. The emotion remained. Michael read the final sentence. If heaven keeps records, Denise Carter already has her own file cabinet. Silence followed. Not because it was dramatic, because it was sincere. The kind of sincerity people rarely hear. Richard smiled. That statement may have influenced the board. The businessman wiped his eyes. The elderly woman nodded approvingly. Maya looked ready to cry. Tom simply smiled. Karen remained motionless. For the first time all morning, she wasn't thinking about Denise's title, or the foundation, or the money. She was thinking about something else. The fact that every single thing she had assumed about Denise had been wrong. Every one. Richard took a slow breath. Then his expression became serious. There was another discovery. The mood shifted. Everyone noticed. Michael closed the file. Richard looked directly at Denise. "What happened after your accident?" Denise froze. The question struck somewhere deep, somewhere painful. The room sensed it immediately. Michael lowered his eyes. Richard's investigators had already told him, but he wanted Denise to hear it from someone who cared. Denise hesitated. "It was a long time ago. What happened?" For a moment she considered avoiding the answer. Then she saw the concern in his eyes, the genuine concern, and she decided to tell the truth. "The hospital let me go." Several people frowned. "They said I couldn't perform my duties anymore." Tom shook his head. The businessman looked irritated. Maya's jaw tightened. Richard listened carefully. "You challenged it?" Denise laughed softly, a sad laugh. "I couldn't afford to." The room fell silent. Because everyone understood. Justice often costs money, sometimes more money than ordinary people have. Richard nodded slowly. Then he looked toward Michael. Michael immediately handed him another document. Richard lifted it slightly. "That's why this exists." Denise frowned. "What is it?" Michael answered. "The board approved it this morning." He smiled. "You're not just being offered an advisory role." Denise felt something shift. A new surprise. Another twist. The morning wasn't finished. Not even close. Michael continued. "You're being offered permanent executive authority over all accessibility programs at Whitman Hope Center." The room reacted instantly. Gasps, whispers, disbelief. Even Tom looked stunned. Maya's eyes widened. The businessman nearly dropped his coffee. This wasn't symbolic anymore. This wasn't honorary. This was leadership. Real leadership. Real influence. The ability to reshape policy. Hiring, training, programs, the future. Richard smiled from the screen. "I don't need another executive." His voice softened. "I need someone who remembers what it feels like to sit on the other side of the desk." The sentence hit every person in the lobby, including Karen. Especially Karen, because suddenly she understood exactly what kind of power Denise Carter was about to have. Not power over people, power to help them, power to change things, power to make sure nobody experienced what she had experienced this morning. And as Denise stared at the documents in disbelief, Karen felt a growing realization settle over her. The woman she had treated like she didn't belong wasn't about to get revenge. She was about to get responsibility, and somehow that felt even more powerful. For a long moment, Denise Carter simply sat there. The documents rested on her lap. The lobby remained silent. Rain streaked the windows. The fountain flowed softly behind her. The entire room seemed to be waiting to see what she would do with this moment, waiting to see what she would do with Karen. Because everyone understood something now. Denise had power. Real power. Not the kind that came from money. Not the kind that came from a title. The kind that comes when the truth is finally visible to everyone. Richard Whitman watched her through the phone screen. Michael stood nearby. Tom remained beside the reception desk. Maya lingered near her cleaning cart. And Karen Miller stood frozen behind the counter she had ruled all morning. Nobody spoke. Then Denise finally broke the silence. "Can I ask a question?" Richard smiled. "Anything." Denise looked around the lobby, at the marble floors, the reception desk, the waiting area, the entrance. Then her eyes settled on the desk itself. The counter stood high. Much too high, designed for standing people, not seated ones, not people like her. She pointed toward it. Who designed that? The question surprised everyone. Michael blinked. The reception desk? Yes. He glanced around. I honestly don't know, and Denise nodded. Then she looked toward Karen. Not angrily, not coldly, simply honestly. That's where the problem starts. Karen looked confused. The rest of the room did too. Denise turned back toward Michael. That desk makes people invisible. Silence. The sentence landed softly, yet everyone felt it. When you're sitting in a wheelchair, you spend half your life looking up at people. Her voice remained calm. You can't see their screens. You can't see their expressions. You can't meet them eye to eye. The businessman near the coffee station slowly lowered his head. The elderly woman nodded. Tom listened carefully. Denise continued. People think accessibility starts with ramps. She shook her head. It starts with dignity. The room fell silent again, because nobody could argue. Richard smiled through the phone. That's exactly why you're here. Denise looked back at him, then at Michael, then finally toward Karen. The receptionist looked terrified. Not because Denise was yelling, because she wasn't. Not because Denise was threatening her, because she wasn't. Karen had spent the entire morning preparing for anger, prepared for accusations, prepared for revenge, prepared for humiliation. She wasn't prepared for grace. That felt much worse. Michael cleared his throat. There will be a formal review. Karen's shoulders tightened. The words sounded final, professional, unavoidable. Richard nodded from the screen. We have cameras. Everyone glanced upward instinctively. Small security cameras sat quietly in the corners of the lobby, recording, watching, remembering. Michael continued. We will review everything. Karen swallowed. The reality of what she'd done was beginning to settle in. Not because Denise had exposed her, because her own actions had. The cameras didn't care about excuses. They only recorded choices. Tom stepped forward. His face carried the look of a man carrying a weight. Ms. Carter. Denise turned. Tom took a breath. I owe you an apology. The lobby listened. The security guard's voice sounded rough. Honest. I should have pushed harder. Denise studied him for a moment, then smiled gently. You listened. Tom shook his head. Not fast enough. Faster than most. The answer surprised him. Denise continued. You asked questions. You hesitated. You wanted to verify. Tom looked away briefly. The compliment somehow hurt, because it reminded him how close he'd come to doing nothing. Denise understood. People often judged themselves hardest after the truth appeared. She wasn't interested in punishing that. She was interested in changing it. Tom nodded quietly. Thank you. Then Denise turned toward Maya. The young woman immediately looked nervous. What? Denise laughed softly. You know exactly what. Maya's cheeks reddened. I only gave you water. The little boy Jason immediately spoke up and helped with the papers. The room laughed. Maya laughed too. Then Denise shook her head. No. Her eyes softened. You saw me. The sentence changed everything. Maya stopped smiling because she understood, truly understood. Sometimes helping isn't lifting someone up. Sometimes helping is simply refusing to look away. Maya wiped at one eye, embarrassed. The businessman pretended not to notice. The elderly woman smiled knowingly. Richard leaned closer to the camera. Michael. Yes? Make sure HR talks to Maya. Maya looked startled. Michael smiled. I think we can arrange that. Richard nodded. Good. Then he looked directly at Maya. The world needs more people who stop. The young woman looked speechless, for perhaps the first time in her life. Karen watched all of it unfold. Every moment, every conversation, every ounce of kindness. And slowly, she realized something painful. Nobody in the room admired Denise because she had been rewarded. They admired her because she had been kind before anyone knew she mattered. That was the difference. That was what Karen never understood. A title doesn't create character. It reveals it. The receptionist lowered her eyes. For the first time all morning, she looked small. Not physically, emotionally, humanly. Michael noticed. So did Denise. And when Denise finally spoke to her, the entire room held its breath. Karen. The receptionist looked up. Fear flashed across her face. She expected condemnation, expected anger, expected the moment she'd been dreading. Instead, Denise asked a question. Do you know what hurt the most? Karen couldn't answer. Denise continued. It wasn't the insults. Silence. It wasn't the assumptions. Another pause. It wasn't even the embarrassment. Karen stared, confused. Then Denise gave her answer. You decided who I was before learning my name. The lobby became perfectly still. The sentence hit harder than anything else that morning. Because it was true. Painfully true. Karen looked away, unable to hold Denise's gaze. For the first time, genuine shame appeared. Not fear, not self-preservation. Shame. The kind that arrives when excuses stop working. Michael quietly stepped in. The review will begin immediately. Karen nodded weakly. No argument, no defense, no explanation. Nothing left to say. Because the evidence wasn't hidden anymore. It was sitting right there in front of everyone. Meanwhile, Denise turned back toward Richard. The billionaire looked relieved, as though he had been waiting for something, maybe hoping for something. What do you want to do first? He asked. The question surprised her. What do you mean? Your new role. Richard smiled. What's the first thing you'd change? Denise didn't hesitate. Not for a second. The entrance. Michael laughed softly. The entrance? The ramp. Everyone looked toward the front doors, toward the narrow path she had struggled through earlier. The one that felt like an afterthought. The one that silently told people they weren't expected. Denise pointed. Widen it, then toward the reception desk. Lower that, then toward the waiting area, and add free transportation assistance for patients who can't get here. The room stared. Michael laughed again. Not because it was funny, because she had already started working, already started fixing things, already started thinking about others. Richard smiled proudly. See? He looked toward Michael. That's exactly why we hired her. The fountain continued flowing. The rain slowly softened outside. And for the first time all morning, Whitman Hope Center felt different. Not because someone powerful had arrived, because someone compassionate had. And as Denise Carter sat beneath the warm lobby lights, surrounded by people whose lives she had already begun changing, she realized something unexpected. The best response to a closed door wasn't revenge. It was building a better one. And 6 months later, she would get the chance to do exactly that. The first snow of winter drifted across Atlanta in soft white flakes. Not enough to cover the streets, just enough to turn the morning quiet. The city moved slower in winter, Coffee shops filled earlier. People walked faster. Bus stops became gathering places for strangers sharing complaints about the cold. And on this particular Monday morning, the entrance to Whitman Hope Center looked very different than it had 6 months earlier. The old ramp was gone. The narrow path Denise had struggled through that rainy morning no longer existed. In its place stood a broad, gently sloping entrance lined with handrails and warm lighting. The automatic doors opened wider now. The reception desk sat lower. Visitors in wheelchairs could look staff members directly in the eye. Nobody had to crane their neck upward. Nobody had to feel invisible. The changes seemed simple. Yet thousands of people noticed them every day. Because dignity often hides inside details. At 8:55 a.m., the lobby doors opened. A young mother stepped inside holding the hand of a little black boy. The child wore leg braces beneath his jeans. His backpack bounced against his shoulders. His eyes widened as he looked around. Children always noticed things adults missed. The fountain. The lights. The giant holiday wreath hanging above the lobby. "Mom," he whispered, "this place is huge." His mother smiled nervously. She looked exhausted. The kind of exhaustion Denise recognized instantly. Single parent. Too many bills. Too many worries. Not enough sleep. The receptionist behind the desk immediately smiled. A genuine smile. "Good morning." The woman looked relieved. "Good morning." The receptionist glanced at the child. "You must be Elijah." The boy nodded. The receptionist smiled wider. "We've been expecting you." 3 simple words. "We've been expecting you." Denise often thought about those words. How different life felt when people expected your arrival instead of questioning it. The receptionist stood, or rather, rolled forward. Her wheelchair glided smoothly beneath the desk. The little boy's eyes widened. "Your chair is cool." The receptionist laughed. "Thanks." The boy grinned. "I have braces." She nodded. "I noticed." The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. Yet the mother's shoulders visibly relaxed. Because her son wasn't being stared at, wasn't being judged, wasn't being pitied. He was simply being welcomed, exactly as every person should be. Across the lobby, Denise watched from a seating area beside the window. A warm cup of coffee rested in her hands. Morning sunlight reflected across the marble floor. She smiled quietly. This was her favorite part of the day. Watching. Not managing. Not directing. Watching. Observing whether the changes were working. Seeing whether people felt different when they entered the building. Most days they did. And every time she witnessed it, the memory of that rainy Monday became a little easier to carry. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "You're doing it again." Denise looked up. Maya Brooks stood nearby. Or rather, Nurse Maya Brooks. The title still made Denise smile. The young woman now wore dark blue scrubs and an employee badge identifying her as a patient care coordinator. The scholarship Richard Whitman had funded changed everything. Maya had completed her final semester, graduated, passed her exams, and accepted a full-time position at Whitman Hope Center. She looked happier now, stronger, more confident. "Doing what?" Denise asked. Maya sat beside her, watching people. Denise laughed softly. "I like watching. I know." Maya glanced toward the entrance. "Elijah seems nervous. He'll be okay. You always know that." "No." Denise smiled. "I just hope." The 2 women watched the little boy disappear down the hallway with a therapist. His mother followed, smiling. A simple scene, yet it represented everything Denise had fought for. Not attention, Not recognition, access, opportunity, respect. Across the lobby stood a framed photograph. Visitors often stopped to look at it. The picture showed something surprisingly ordinary: a bottle of water resting on a counter. Nothing more. No explanation. No plaque. No dramatic description. Just the image. Most people never understood its meaning. Maya always did, because 6 months earlier, she had been the one holding that water. The one person who stopped. The one person who saw. Tom Harris understood too. The veteran security officer entered through the side hallway carrying a clipboard. He was 6 months closer to retirement now, and 6 months wiser. Every new security employee received the same speech from him. Every single one. Treat people like they matter before you know whether they do. The lesson had become famous inside the building. Several staff members jokingly called it the Tom rule. Tom secretly liked that, though he'd never admit it. He noticed Denise and Maya sitting together. "Morning." "Morning, Tom. How's retirement planning?" Tom groaned. "Everyone keeps asking me that." Denise laughed. "Because you're retiring. I'm thinking about delaying it." Maya looked surprised. "Really?" Tom nodded. "This place feels different now." His eyes moved across the lobby. The wider ramp, the lower desk, the welcoming atmosphere, the people helping instead of judging. Then he smiled. "I kinda like seeing it." Denise felt her throat tighten slightly, because she understood. The building had changed, but so had the people inside it. That mattered more. Much more. At 9:15 a.m., Michael Whitman appeared from the executive elevator. He looked less stressed these days. Still busy. Still important. But less rushed. The center had experienced its most successful 6 months in years. Patient satisfaction was up. Community engagement was up. Accessibility scores had become some of the highest in the state. The business magazines loved writing about it. Michael hated interviews, but he admitted the results spoke for themselves. He walked toward Denise. "Morning." "Morning." Michael handed her a small envelope. She frowned. "What's this?" "A letter." "From who?" Michael smiled. "Open it." Denise carefully unfolded the paper. The handwriting looked familiar. Very familiar. Richard Whitman. He was home now. Recovered. Traveling less. Working less. Enjoying life more. His letter was short. Just 1 page. Typical Richard. Denise read quietly. "Miss Carter. 6 months ago, you stopped in the rain for a stranger. You had no idea who he was. Today I watched a mother walk through a door that didn't exist before you arrived. I think that's the better story. Thank you for reminding all of us what these buildings are supposed to do." Richard Denise folded the letter carefully, then looked toward the entrance, toward the wider ramp, toward the lower desk, toward the people entering without fear. Michael sat beside her. "You know, reporters still ask about Karen." Denise sighed. "They ask about everyone." Karen Miller had been terminated after the review. The investigation uncovered years of complaints, patterns, behaviors, warnings that had been ignored. The outcome surprised nobody, least of all Karen. But Denise rarely thought about her anymore, because the story had never really been about Karen. It was about the system that allowed people to feel invisible. Fixing one person wasn't enough. Fixing the building mattered more. She looked toward the little boy's mother emerging from the hallway. The woman was smiling. Actually smiling. A look of relief replacing months of worry. That mattered. That was the point. Michael followed her gaze. You ever regret not suing? Denise shook her head. No. Not even once? She smiled. No. Michael nodded, because he already knew the answer. A lawsuit would have changed one life. This changed thousands. The fountain continued flowing. Sunlight spilled across the marble. The lobby felt warm, safe, welcoming, the way places like this should feel. A few moments later, Elijah came running back down the hallway. His therapy session had gone well. He stopped near the reception desk, turned around, and waved toward Denise. She waved back. The boy grinned, then disappeared through the doors with his mother. Just another patient. Just another family. Just another ordinary morning. And that made it perfect. Because 6 months earlier, Denise Carter had been told she didn't belong in a building she was invited into. Now she sat watching that same building welcome people who once would have been overlooked. The greatest victory wasn't the title, wasn't the foundation, wasn't the money. It wasn't even the recognition. It was the wider door, the lower desk, the child who felt expected, the mother who felt respected, the stranger who no longer had to prove their worth before receiving kindness. Denise looked out the window as snow drifted softly across the city. Then she smiled. Because sometimes the best way to answer cruelty isn't revenge. It's making sure the next person never has to experience it. And if this story touched your heart, leave a comment and tell us honestly. If you had been standing in that lobby before anyone knew Denise's name, what would you have done? And here's something simple. If you believe every person deserves respect before they have to prove their worth, type the number 1 in the comments. If you've ever been judged unfairly but kept going anyway, type the number 0. No long message needed, just a single number. I read the comments, and I'd love to know who's watching with us today. And if stories like this remind you that kindness still matters in this world, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the next story might inspire you, surprise you, or even change the way you see someone standing right in front of you. Until next time, be kind to strangers, keep your heart open, and remember, you never know whose life you're changing with a single act of kindness.